welcome you all. Are these on? Are we on? Can you hear back there? We're live? Okay. I want to welcome you all. This is a hearing I never thought we'd be having on a topic I didn't think we had to discuss. There's a lot of responsibilities in elective office for everybody here and those who work in departments, et cetera, about responding with due diligence to things that come up. I don't even know how deeply we're going to get into the topics that we're going to begin to address or how big the challenges are. I do know when something is brought to my attention where there's a lot of smoke, I figure there must be some kind of fire. And so today we're going to be investigating or reviewing some of the assertions from the that were brought forward from Fox 9. Come to find out, this is not new news. I didn't know. But other people are like, oh, didn't you know? I didn't know. And so people are coming forward. And so in terms of making sure every dollar that is spent on a human services program is well spent, that's the point of today. I don't have a preconceived conclusion to this. Frankly, I'm looking for what the next step might be. And so we're going to watch 2 short videos so people be current on at least what's out there. We're going to hear from various individuals. And I think we're going to have a very interesting discussion. So that, let's roll the video, please.
Is to be rampant fraud in a massive state program. A fraud suspected of costing Minnesota taxpayers as much as $100 million a year. Our reporting is based on public records and nearly a dozen government sources who have direct knowledge of what's happening. These sources have a deep fear, and there's evidence to support their concerns that some of that public money is ending up in the hands of terrorists. We begin at Minneapolis-St. Paul International Airport, where mysterious suitcases filled with cash have become a fairly common carry-on. It's the morning of March 15th. We're chasing a tip about a man who's leaving the country. Our sources tell us he just took a carry-on bag through security that was packed with $1 million cash. You can do that as long as you fill out one of these government forms. We're told these cloak and dagger-like scenarios now happen almost weekly at MSP International. The money is usually headed to the Middle East, Dubai, and points beyond. Our sources say last year alone, more than $100 million cash left MSP in carry-on luggage.
What we were interested in is where it was going.
The national go-to expert on what's behind these mysterious money transfers is Glenn Kearns. He's a former Seattle police detective who spent 15 years on the FBI's Joint Terrorism Task Force until his retirement.
It's an outright crime. It's unbelievable.
Kearns tracked millions of dollars in cash that was leaving on flights from Seattle. It was coming from hawalas, businesses used to courier money to countries that have no official banking system. Some immigrant communities rely on hawalas to send funds to help impoverished relatives back home. Kearns discovered some of the money was being funneled to a hawala in a region of Somalia that's controlled by the Al-Shabaab terrorist group.
So I talked to a couple sources who had lived in that region, and I said, if money is going to this hawala, do you think it's going to Al-Shabaab? And he said, oh, definitely. That area is controlled by Al-Shabaab, and they control the hawala there.
He says when the money arrives, whether it was intended for legitimate purposes or not, Al-Shabaab or other groups demand a cut. As Kearns dug deeper, he found that some of the individuals who were sending out tens of thousands of dollars worth of remittance payments happened to be on government assistance in this country. How could they possibly come up with such big bucks to transfer back home?
We had sources that told us it's all about it's welfare fraud. It's all about the daycare.
To better understand the connection between daycare fraud and the surge in carry-on cash, you have to look at the history of this crime. 5 years ago, the Fox 9 investigators were first to report that daycare fraud was on the rise here in Minnesota. We exposed how some businesses were gaming the system to steal millions in government subsidies meant to help low-income families with their child care expenses.
It's a great way to make some money. I think it's kind of that informal word of mouth.
In order for the scheme to work, the daycare centers need to sign up low-income families that qualify for child care assistance funding. These surveillance videos are from a case prosecuted by Hennepin County. They show parents checking their kids into a center only to leave with them a few minutes later. Sometimes no children would show up. But either way, the center would bill the state for a full day of child care. This video from that same case shows a man handing out envelopes of what are believed to be kickback payments to parents who are in on the fraud.
Where was the money going?
I don't know exactly where it went, but it adds up when you begin to look at how many people are involved.
One recent federal case points to at least some of the money going overseas. This is video of Fozia Ali being sworn in as a member of the City of Hopkins Park Board. As she was taking her oath of office, she was also under investigation for wire fraud and theft of public money. State and federal agents had already raided Ali's daycare center in South Minneapolis. The business was suspected of billing the government for over $1 million worth of bogus child care services.
We found records that indicated that she was collecting a significant amount of money for a much larger number of children than were actually attending the center.
Did any of the money go overseas?
We are aware that some of the funds went overseas, which she was cashing out money from the business.
Do you have any idea what it was going for?
I can't say.
Can't say or don't know?
I can't say.
Investigators analyzed Ali's cell phone to track her activities. She'd taken a 2-month trip from Minnesota to Dubai and then Kenya, staying at times in $800 a night hotel rooms. She used an app on her phone to bill the state of Minnesota for child care services while she was out of the country. Ali pled guilty to the daycare fraud and this March started serving time in a federal prison. She declined our request for an interview.
We believe that there's a scope of fraud out there that we need to really get our arms around and ensure that those dollars are going to the kids that really need them.
The acting commissioner for the Department of Human Services told us his agency has 10 daycares currently under active investigation for fraud. We've learned dozens more are considered suspicious. Search warrants obtained by the Fox 9 investigators show each one of the suspect centers has received several $1 million in child care assistance funds. According to public records and government sources, most are owned by Somali immigrants.
Do you have any evidence to suggest this looks like organized crime?
There's a common pattern in how a lot of these are carried out, but beyond that, not something that I would directly categorize as organized crime.
Sources in the Somali community tell us it's an open secret that starting a daycare center is a license to make money. The fraud is so widespread, they say, that people buy shares of daycare businesses to get a cut of the huge public subsidies that are pouring in. Some government insiders believe this scam is costing the state at least $100 million a year, half of all child care subsidies.
Is that within the realm of possibility?
I don't think half sounds credible. I certainly think that some of the schemes that we're seeing, and certainly the ones that we brought forward already for prosecution, involve millions of dollars. I mean, this is not a small scale that we're looking at.
Minnesota started aggressively going after daycare fraud in 2014. Back then, it was easier to track the flow of money. The state would pay a daycare's bill, and within hours of the money showing up in the business's bank account, funds were being wired to the United Arab Emirates. But those wire transfers stopped after a few centers were busted, which takes us back to the suitcases of cash at Minneapolis-St. Paul International. In 2015, investigators documented $14 million in carry-on cash. By 2016, it had mushroomed to $84 million, and then last year, $100 million. A trend all too familiar to former terrorism investigator Glenn Kearns.
How much confidence can you say that it's likely some of this money is going towards terrorism?
I'd say absolutely, absolutely. Our sources tell us that. Good sources from the community, leaders. My personal feeling is we need a nationwide task force to clamp down on this kind of fraud.
This crime is spreading. Our sources tell us fraudsters in other states are now using the Minnesota playbook to rip off millions of public dollars meant to help kids. I'm Fox 9 investigator Jeff Ballion.
So yeah, run this side. There's two.
And it's believed by
There were two shows. We're going to listen to both.
sources with direct knowledge of the fraud that some of the money could be ending up with terror organizations. Jeff Ballion joining us now with more on his investigation. Jeff?
That's right. Tonight you're going to hear from a government whistleblower who tried sounding the alarm about this massive fraud well over a year ago. He's speaking out because he believes he has a moral obligation to do so and because he feels lives are on the line.
Emails obtained by the Fox 9 investigators show the Department of Human Services was warned that it had a massive daycare fraud problem on its hands, that millions of stolen tax dollars were going overseas, and it was likely some of the money was being skimmed by terrorism organizations.
I've never seen anything of this level or scope in my 27-year career as an investigator.
Scott Stillman spent 8 years managing the state's digital forensics lab. That means he mined data from computers and smartphones. When the state started going after daycare centers suspected of fraud, Stillman was directly involved in the investigations. He was so alarmed by what he was finding that in March of 2017, he fired off a series of emails to his supervisors at the Department of Human Services.
We are working on and currently overwhelmed with significant fraud cases involving organized crime, defrauding hundreds of millions of dollars annually in taxpayer monies.
Here, Stillman is reading from one of the emails he wrote, which the Fox 9 investigators obtained through a public records request. DHS took 2 months before it turned over the emails, and much of what it provided to us was redacted.
They were not easy to write, but I felt I had an obligation because I think that there is a strong possibility this money is being used against innocent civilians and against our military.
Stillman says he alerted a number of people in DHS, including the Commissioner's Chief of Staff, with this message.
Significant amounts of these defrauded dollars are being sent overseas to countries and organizations connected to entities known to fund terrorism.
Was the warning ever passed along to Governor Dayton?
I was not informed.
He says no, but other sources tell us people within the governor's office were told about these concerns a couple of years ago.
My chief of staff currently and previous chief of staff, from what I'm told, did not get any information alleging that there was that kind of volume of theft.
The state currently has 10 daycare centers under investigation for fraudulent billing of child care services. Each of the suspect centers has received several $1 million in government subsidies. According to public records and government sources, most are owned by Somali immigrants. We asked the Department of Human Services about the emails Scott Stillman sent in 2017. Who in the chain of command was aware of them and when? It responded with a statement. The Deputy Commissioner, Communications and Legal Staff learned there may be emails on this subject when Fox 9 made its data request in March. The then Chief Compliance Officer was informed at the time the emails were originally sent.
I would like to have an independent federal investigation of the handling of DHS programs, specifically a daycare program and the Medicaid fraud program, by preferably Homeland Security or the Department of Justice.
Scott Stillman is no longer with the state. He resigned from his position this past March after 10 years on the job.
Thank you very much. So the plan for today, we have Mr. Stillman is here to testify, if he could come up right now. And then we're going to hear from the department and then Mr. Jamal, and there'll be discussions all along the way. And so just so people understand, so you don't get too many questions in your mind, we'll have Mr. Stillman testify and then he'll step away. And then the department will come up and we can ask them some questions. And Mr. Stillman, welcome to the committee. And it's been a pleasure to get to meet you today. And I thank you for coming to tell us what's on your mind.
Thank you for having me here.
Oh, so just tell us your name, and then you can get into your comments.
My name is Scott Stillman. I worked for the Department of Human Services. I started working there in 2007, became the manager of the Digital Forensics Lab in 2010. My job there was to investigate primarily employee misconduct, especially as it resolved to digital technology, computers, cell phones, servers, emails. As the daycare program grew, my duties expanded, and I was assigned to go out with law enforcement officers, both FBI, Health and Human Services, BCA, local law enforcement, and a team of investigators embedded within DHS to execute search warrants at some of the businesses that were allegedly committing some fraud. So my job was on the front lines. I would go with the police, they'd execute a lawful search warrant. My job was to identify the computers, the servers, and collect them, extract the data from them, to do some analysis, but then I would give the deeper data that I took from the computers to a team of people in the Office of Inspector General, which is embedded at DHS. Those people, there's a team of those people. Most of those are highly skilled, highly trained. Their expertise consists of terrorism, money laundering, bank fraud, social media investigations. A lot of them are retired law enforcement with highly respected careers. We worked as a team to analyze this data. I got to this point. I was a deputy sheriff with the Washington County Sheriff's Department. I was a detective. My job was to investigate computer crimes, and they sent me to a lot of federal training. I've been trained at the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center, as have some of my colleagues, and my skill set is highly specialized in this area. If I could mention some of the things that I worked on, they were daycare frauds based out of Department of Human Services, and they were significant. They were overwhelming. The dollar amounts were upwards of 15 million. I was overwhelmed with the data that I was receiving. I was overwhelmed with what I was seeing on the computers and on their cell phones. I tracked individuals overseas using their phone to compounds in the desert, in countries that are not friendly to the United States, where they would spend months over there while they were operating their DHS daycare business. And then my job was to determine if they were communicating while they were overseas and provide that information. And that's how Fawzia Ali's case went. I found the emails that she sent from Kenya to Hennepin County while she was billing for daycare that she wasn't even present for. My other duties include Medicaid fraud, specifically in the personal care attendant fraud. The dollar amounts and the scope, the size of that far outweigh daycare. I've heard it said that daycare fraud is 100 million. I've heard investigators at DHS tell me, well, I've heard the news media say it's 50% fraud rate. I've had investigators tell me it's closer to 70-80% fraud rate. And those investigators are prohibited from disclosing the data to you that they have because of data privacy laws. They go to work every day and they agonize over what they see on those computers, what they do, what they see in the bank search warrants that they run, where that money goes, where it comes from. Some of those banks, when they were doing the banks, when they were floating money through the banks, it would be deposited at 3 in the morning, and the owner of the account would quickly transfer it from one account to the next, second after second, and go through 50 different bank accounts, which is a form of money laundering. The data we were seeing on the phones was especially alarming. wire transfers, pictures in foreign countries. I was concerned. I was deeply concerned. And not only because of what I saw, but because of what law enforcement was telling me. I worked very closely with I was a law enforcement officer. I had a lot of friends in law enforcement. And we worked together everywhere from Health and Human Services to FBI to local law enforcement to county sheriffs to state police. We all worked as a team. And some of the things they were telling me and some of the investigations they were working on, I had a hard time sleeping at night. And I would encourage you, talk to some of those people. They'll talk to you. You may have to do it privately, off the record. But what they would reveal to you is, I think it has a national security implication. I really do. And so do they. I worked on a lot of Medicaid fraud, and that the dollar amount of fraud in Medicaid fraud, particularly in personal care attendant fraud, way exceeds the daycare fraud. But most of that money is going to extravagant lifestyles, drugs, large houses, things of that nature. But there's no controls. Or I should say the controls are inadequate. They're not enforced. There's few checks and balances. When we did the Lillian Richardson case, that was in the news. She was on probation in Arkansas for a felony Medicaid fraud conviction. And she was running 50 different shell companies. By shell company, I mean a fraudulent, non-existent company up here in Minnesota, using her family members to extort, to use fraudulent means to extract money from the DHS Medicaid program. And that's in the newspaper. You can look at that. When we stopped counting the loss, it was 18 million. I know it was higher than that. A week after she was released from jail, I was told she was up and running again and started the same businesses and was collecting money from DHS because the controls, the checks and balances, prevented them from shutting her down again. Barb Curran, look in the news. She's in Shakopee prison. She ran a $5 million organized crime ring from her prison cell using a state computer. I asked the state agency if I could have that computer so I could track the money, and they would not give me that computer. There was a way to find that money to get that $5 million back, but we never got that money back because we don't know where it went. Was it possible to find out? Absolutely, but I was prevented. Barb Curran is in the newspaper, and you can check that out. There's some other programs at DHS as well that I know of where they teach people to train immigrants, where they teach them how to find a job. And most of those, the one recently that was in Hennepin County Court for a trial just a few months ago, he used the money to have a harem of females. He had 12 females, and that's how his lifestyle was. That's how he used the money he received for that program. Not all of it, but a good substantial part of it. The internal controls on these programs really need to be examined. I think, and I really appreciate you having me here today to talk about this, because I think, seriously, I do think that there's a national security implication. I think there are lives at stake. And if I could just take a story, every time there was a terrorist attack, Paris, San Bernardino, France, Paris, even the Syrian war, we would, as investigators, we would get together the day after the attack, and we would ponder amongst ourselves, how much Minnesota taxpayer dollars was being used to fund that war, that attack? What bought that gun? Where'd that money come from? Someone should be tracking that. And I think some federal agencies are doing that, but there are some impediments to that you should know about. There are some restrictions to that. I think if you had to ask me for a suggestion on this, and I've been at DHS for 10 years, and I'm no longer there. When I wrote that email, that was the death knell for me, and I had to resign. But when I was there, I saw the internal controls. I saw the Office of Inspector General, which was run and operated by DHS. And I saw the controls, or lack of controls, the checks and balances for these programs. And I liken it to a police officer who commits a crime and then turns around and tells us, well, I'll investigate myself and tell you what I find. If you really want to have objectivity and independence and accuracy and full disclosure and transparency, you really might want to consider taking the investigative component away from the entity that controls and manages it and make them independent. I can't emphasize that strongly enough, that you are not being told everything. There are things out there. When Fox 9 pulled out my emails, where I think there were 12 emails, complete pages were redacted. And what was redacted were my case statistics. I was required to keep track of how many cases I was running every month, the dollar amount of the fraud, whether it was organized crime. And believe me, Minnesota's government programs are being victimized by organized crime because of lack of controls. And I could show you example after example after example, mostly because of lack of controls. But that's what was redacted from my emails. And if I could say one more thing, the data privacy laws in place prevented me from coming forward. It prevents my coworkers who have just as many concerns as I have from coming forward. The whistleblower laws that the states control severely restrict me from coming forward and saying what I know and prevent them from coming as well. The data privacy laws are, they're ripe for corruption in the state of Minnesota. On Fox 9's news report, and I have to give a congratulations to Fox 9, because they had the courage to come forward and say this. And there were a lot of things that they discovered that they didn't put in their news report. And I would encourage you to talk to the reporter, because there are things in there that they just didn't think they could quite put out there, things that would probably really concern you. If I said in my Fox 9 investigation and my interview that I would like to request a federal investigation of how these programs are being run and managed at DHS. And I said that for a reason, and I spoke to Senator Abler about that. But I think it needs to be objective and somebody who is not controlled by someone in the state, not necessarily you, but other individuals who might have an influence on that and on that investigation. And I think the entity to do that would be the Health and Human Services at the federal level. I'm just going to close with saying one thing. This is not a Minnesota problem. It started in Minnesota, but we found an individual in our investigation who was teaching and training other states to do this, and it's spreading out. It's in Seattle, New Jersey, New York, Florida, Georgia. It's everywhere. And so I appreciate the time that you provided me to be here today.
Thank you, Mr. Stillman. Actually, we chatted, and we had a very good discussion, you and I. And so, keeping my own rule of not doing questions, I just ask you to elaborate on some of the things we spoke about that didn't come out in your conversation. So you talked about, 4 main areas where you saw concerns: the child care thing, which made the news; the PCA program, which you said it was some 5 times as much; this training program, and then the lack of internal controls. Could you just comment a little bit about so you gave us some examples of success stories where people have gone to jail, but there's some gaps that you saw. Like, could you just offer a little thought about in the child care program, what gaps are not being addressed in the oversight by DHS?
Besides the lack of controls, unannounced on-site inspections, background checks, cameras on site, things of that nature, the restitution levels on those cases are, I would encourage you to look closely. I would say that I was informed that the DECO investigation, which is in the newspaper, so I think they obtained $4 million conviction with restitution on that. When that case started, I was informed by investigators it was actually $40 million in fraud. But because of statute of limitations and policies in place, not all of that money could be prosecuted and therefore collected. So I would say if there's indications that restitution is taking place, I would verify that.
Thank you. And so let me ask the second part. And so just the last thing I think I'll have you talk about, you mentioned PCAs. Can you mention some ways that are not being investigated where people commit fraud that you think the department should be doing? Please.
The PCA fraud and Medicaid fraud is rampant. The controls in place are inadequate. I've been on search warrants where you'll have employees, the police will have the employees there, and the phone will be ringing, and nurses will be calling in and saying, I'm calling because I just was reported that you reported that I work for you, you have my name, my date of birth, and you're telling the IRS I work for you, but I've never worked for you. So those are shell companies for the most part. A lot of that money is being diverted to sources that are not helping the real needy Minnesotans. And I think there should be an independent audit of the controls, the laws, the regulations, the checks and balances, things of that nature.
Well, thank you. And I'm not sure if I don't want you to name any names, but just I want you to say it, not me, because we were talking about that. And would you say that, we talked about this, so you had mentioned that there were some examples of undue influence by some people in high positions that were influencing some of the outcomes of some of these investigations. Do you want to comment about that? No names.
That's why I asked for an independent federal investigation. A federal investigation would reveal that there are other entities involved in this who may be receiving benefits from this fraud. And I want to be really careful what I say here because...
Well, that's fine. I just wanted to broach that topic as well.
Okay.
So this has been, and so it's very sensitive. And anyway, Mr. Stillman, thank you.
Thank you.
So you're excused.
Thank you.
And so, Senator Hayden.
So, Mr. Chair, I just wanted to, I recognize sensitivity of what we're doing here. I just wanted to get a bit of a lay of the land. It doesn't look like we're going to ask questions of witnesses, or are we going to be able to, or
yeah,
just,
we are
just help me understand how we're going to work.
Just not of Mr. Stillman. There'll be questions all you want after that. So I was just happy Mr. Stillman came forward and so kind of laid the stage for us. And so now we're going to actually invite the department to come up if they will. Whoever wants to represent the department's voice today would.
So, Mr.
all
Chair,
are welcome. Senator Hayden.
So I appreciate Mr. Stillman's testimony, and I think it's important, but I think it is also pretty important on the record to say that he put a lot out there for us to digest without us being able to kind of understand better where this information came from, where it was going, why did he, I mean, he said a lot, and I don't want to refute any of it because it's really important information, but I do just want to say that I think that I want to make sure that this is a hearing that we're able to really get to the bottom of it, and between the news report that just kind of gave us information without us being able to go back and forth with it. And then Mr. Stillman, there is just this kind of presumption that's put on the table without it being examined. So I'm certainly not going to ask the reporter to come, and I'm certainly not going to ask Mr. Stillman to come forth. He wouldn't do it. I don't think that would be fair. But I do want to say that I want to make sure that we have a hearing that we have the ability to examine the evidence that's put before us as we start to think about what we should do.
Right. And so Senator Hayden and others, I think that it's fair to say Mr. Stillman has an assertion that he's brought forward based upon his experience, and you can use the value of that as you do. To me, it was a relatively novel like big deal assertion from a person who appears credible. And so this is not, we're not going to get to the bottom of it today. This is the beginning of us looking into it with our due diligence. And after this hearing, people can call them up and you can talk to the department. And so this is not a hearing I ever thought I'd be having. And so to the process, or Senator Jensen, do you want to?
To the process, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, sure.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Senator Hayden referenced getting to the bottom of this. Please correct me if I misunderstand, Mr. Chair, but I didn't think we would be getting to the bottom of this today. I thought that this was to more be fact-finding and possibly determining next steps. Is that your impression? Or what is your goal today in terms of when we leave here, please?
I want to see if it's a fog machine or if there's really smoke and there's a fire. And that's what I'm trying to find out. I have, you know, I didn't even know that Mr. Stillman could come until this morning. So and so that's all. And I also want to announce that we invited the Attorney General and Ramsey County Attorney John Choi's office to come. We do have someone from the Attorney General here. This all came on short notice, so if we want to ask them any questions later. So, Mr. Johnson, I presume you'd like to get on an MLT plane. And so anyway, thank you. I appreciate you coming, and the floor is yours, and we'll have a discussion. And thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My name is Chuck Johnson. I serve as Acting Commissioner of the Minnesota Department of Human Services. Thanks for the opportunity to be here and to share the work that we've been doing to aggressively pursue fraud in the Child Care Assistance Program. This is an issue that's been a high priority for the agency for 6 years. It's an issue we've been working on over that time period. Any money that's fraudulently obtained from the state through any of our programs is a dime that we should not be having go out the door. And those are crimes we need to pay attention to, and we need to be addressing these crimes seriously. Fraud is not something that we tolerate within our programs. This is particularly egregious in the Child Care Assistance Program. This is a program that's intended to provide funds to help low-income children have an opportunity to experience child care, to get a start on school, for families to be able to work. We have 2,500 families on a waiting list for basic sliding fee child care. We can't afford to be wasting money going to criminals and into their pockets. I want to start by sharing some of the history of our work and what we've done to address this problem over the course of the last several years. In 2011, Governor Dayton and then Commissioner Jessen created the Office of the Inspector General in DHS. Prior to that point, we didn't have any centralized way that we worked on the fraud work. There were fraud units in different programs that were scattered across the agency, but there was no central way that we focused on what we did with our fraud efforts. It wasn't well coordinated. There was inconsistency in how that work was done, and there wasn't common leadership over those efforts to ensure that we were taking a aligned approach to how we were handling those issues across the agency. It was right around this time that we became aware that there were concerns about fraud within the child care program on the provider side. Mr. Stillman suggested that this started in Minnesota. It actually, if you look in the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel, you'll see a series of stories, I think from 2009, about Wisconsin, very similar schemes. We actually learned about it from some of our colleagues in Wisconsin who were sharing that they had heard that some of these schemes were moving to Minnesota. We also heard from counties that were saying, we're seeing some of these cases, we're investigating them, we're trying to do what we can, we just don't have the resources to do this. At that time, there was no one in state government who had dedicated resources and a dedicated mission to investigate child care fraud. So we came to the legislature in 2012 and we asked to create that authority and create that capacity within DHS. And that was the Child Care Fraud Unit that was built within the Office of Inspector General. And that was supported by the legislature and the funds were provided, and we began to put that office in motion. From the time that that unit's been fully staffed, which was around in early 2015, we've had 49 civil investigations completed. We've closed 13 centers due to fraud, stopped all payments going from those centers. We have 6 criminal convictions, 5 of them through state court, 1 through federal court, another 2 criminal matters that are still pending. We've had more than $4.6 million in restitution that's been ordered by courts as part of these cases. And we have 8 child care centers that have been assessed fines and overpayments for falsifying attendance records and not documenting care that was actually provided. Last year in 2017, we came back to the legislature and we asked for 8 additional FTEs for this unit to be able to continue to address what we were seeing as a growing problem and a problem that we needed more resources to be able to adequately address. And again, the legislature was supportive and provided those funds, and we have now hired 6 of those individuals and are working on hiring the additional 2. I thought it was important to go through this history to make several points. One is that this isn't a new topic. This isn't a new topic to Department of Human Services, and it shouldn't be a new topic to those who have been serving on Health and Human Services committees. These are issues that we've been talking about for several years. These are issues that you've helped provide us the resources to address. There have been raids, there have been court hearings, there have been very public coverage around some of the successes we've had where we've been able to bring criminal convictions. Secondly, we responded to this issue as soon as we became aware that it was an issue we needed to address. And some of you remember Jerry Kerber, who was the first Inspector General at the OIG, and Jerry was extremely passionate about this issue. And after we put the OIG together in 2011, he came to us and said, there is a gap in our fraud work, and that gap is in child care providers, and we need to build a capacity to address this problem. And then finally, as I said, you supported us. This has been an issue that the legislature has been supportive of us on, both when we came to set up the office initially in 2012 and again when we came back last year and asked for additional resources to be able to fight these problems within our child care programs. Just a few more specific issues that I'd like to address that have been discussed here today. First, we work closely with law enforcement on all investigations, as Mr. Stillman said. Law enforcement is involved in our investigations. That includes state and federal law enforcement as well. Our role is to investigate child care fraud. In the course of those investigations, we may discover or be investigating individuals that are of interest to other law enforcement agencies, other investigative agencies, both federal and state. And we work with them and we cooperate with them, and we provide the information when we can that they need or ask for as part of their investigations. I can't tell you sitting here today what federal agencies are investigating or not investigating. I can tell you that if you ask them, they'd probably say no comment, because that's usually what they say when you ask them what they're up to. Whether that's the FBI or Homeland Security, U.S. Attorney's Office, there may be a case here that is bigger than I know about that will be indicted tomorrow or sometime next month or sometime next year. I'm only telling you that because I'm just trying to tell you what our role is, and our role is to prosecute the fraud, child care fraud on these cases. And we work with other law enforcement, and as has been talked about, through the course of these, sometimes there are connections we're making with other law enforcement. None of the cases that have been publicly charged, the 8 that we've charged, have any direct link to terrorism. That is the public record that I can point to at this time. We have 10 ongoing investigations. I can't speak to what's happening in ongoing investigations. As I said, I can't speak to related investigations other agencies may be doing. I just think it's important to understand that while we don't have jurisdiction over issues like terrorism, we certainly cooperate with those who do. Finally, I don't know that the numbers that have been talked about here are credible. $100 million, the Child Care Assistance Program budget is about $250 million. $100 million is an awful lot of money from our experience and what we've seen both on the fraud side and on the expenditure side to believe would actually be a credible number of fraud in this program. That isn't to say that fraud isn't significant. As I said, we have restitution on $4.6 million from the 6 cases that have been convicted. We have 2 more pending. We have 10 more investigating. These are not small cases, and some of them have significant money attached to them. One of the numbers that was mentioned earlier was a center that had as much as 15 million. I just looked at some stats, and over the last 6 years, the largest center that has billed us has been around $12 million. You can't defraud us for more than you're billing us for, and so I think that we need to just get our arms around the numbers and understand what's credible here and what isn't. To be clear, as I've said, there is an issue here, and we've been aggressive in pursuing it. And so with that, I'm going to ask Carolyn Hamm, who is Inspector General in the Office of Inspector General at DHS, to fill in a little more of the specifics around how we do these investigations and our current staffing and so forth.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson. And actually, just The whole thing is quite compelling, you have to admit. And so, but for the purpose of this committee, I think we're interested particularly in the DHS side, and maybe Senator Limmer's committee or other committees could be taking on the terrorism part, which is certainly a horrifying idea. But I appreciate your comments about that. Ms. Ham, welcome to the committee.
Thank you, Senator Abler. My name is Carolyn Ham. I am the Inspector General for DHS. I was asked to sort of take us through how we do our investigations, and necessarily I will be quite vague because we're not going to reveal exactly how we do things because we don't want to be discovered. So what I can tell you is that we regularly get tips, complaints. We do data mining and look at providers that appear to be aberrant. We then begin an investigation. We will collect records. We may speak to people. We will build our case. If we feel that we have a case that warrants a criminal investigation, we have 2 BCA agents that are basically on contract with us. So they are part of our unit, although they are part of the BCA. And so that allows us to be able to draft a search warrant and execute the search warrant. So if we get to that point where we feel there's enough evidence for probable cause, then we will execute a search warrant. At that point, we then notify all of the counties that child care center, that a search warrant has been executed, and we instruct them to stop paying CCAP payments. So the payments are cut off at that point. We continue our investigation. As you heard from Mr. Stillman, we seize computers, phones, et cetera, for evidence. Mr. Stillman and the forensic unit within the internal audits unit are fabulous and get us some great information. We will do subpoenas to get additional records, and when we reach a point, if we reach a point where we feel we have proof beyond a reasonable doubt, then we will approach the appropriate prosecution unit to discuss charging. So it could be, if we're looking at just theft by swindle, that we would be going to the counties, the county attorneys, to see if they'd be interested in prosecuting. Or it could be that we would go to the U.S. attorney if there are federal charges, if there's money laundering, and that sort of thing. And so the prosecutions that we've had have been both at the county level and the federal level. At that point, of course, then they will take over any continued investigation, and we will provide whatever support they need, and obviously testify if they need that as well. But there are many cases that may not reach that level. We may not have proof beyond a reasonable doubt. We may not have proof that there is intent. This may be a situation where they just billed improperly. We have options then as well. Then we have administrative options. We regularly look at attendance records and determine if they've met all the requirements for the attendance records, and if they haven't, then we will assess an overpayment. And we've done that numerous times, and we've recovered $284,000 from inappropriate billing, not necessarily fraud, but inappropriate billing. Let's see. One piece that we do regularly is, as you may be aware, the child care licensing is also under the OIG. And so when our licensors go out for their annual inspections of child care centers, if there are CCAP children in that child care, then we will ask for a sampling of attendance records. And when we get those, we will then look to see, are they meeting all the requirements that they need to require? If we notice a substantial problem, we will actually then have our CCAP unit go out and request additional records. So we have a regular check on the attendance at a minimum, and we can take it from the administrative perspective as well. I also want to point out that we aren't the only ones who can bring these cases or can investigate these cases. Counties are welcome to investigate these cases, and oftentimes they will. And they can call us. We will assist them if they want, if they just need a little help. And so we've had several cases that have actually been started and brought by the county fraud investigators. So we have many people working on these cases. I think what I just want to make sure we understand is this $100 million figure that is being thrown around. That is the amount of money that is leaving the airport. there is no evidence to suggest that the majority of that money is coming from child care fraud or any other kind of fraud. And so I just want to make sure that we don't conflate those two numbers in terms of what is the amount of fraud and how much money is leaving via the airports, because we do not have any evidence that is anywhere close to $100 million. I also want to point out that I'm afraid that the Somali child care centers are being painted with a broad brush here, and I want us to acknowledge that there are many, many fine Somali child care centers that are providing excellent care to our children and are parent-aware rated and are doing everything right. And I want to make sure that that doesn't get lost in this rush to judgment. I also want to point out that we hold quarterly meetings with the counties. So that is the OIG CCAP fraud unit, the DHS's Child Care Assistance Program, and the counties, and that's the county's CCAP supervisors, it's the fraud investigators. We meet on a quarterly basis, and we talk about what are we seeing in the fraud area in child care, what can we do about it. Many of the suggestions, many of the changes that we have made from a legislative point of view have come out of those discussions with the counties who are on the ground level so that we know what is happening and we figure out how to address that. I do have several ideas for things that we could do to help the situation in terms of from a legislative point of view, and we haven't proposed any of them, but we would certainly intend to be happy to talk about them. But one of them that we've thought about is requiring a surety bond for child care centers that receive more than, say, $100,000 in CCAP funds. We do have that provision for PCA agencies. They do have to have a surety bond. And in the last, since 2017, we've collected $377,000 as a result of determining overpayments, and then the agency's not able to pay them, we can then go to the surety company and collect it. So that would be a suggestion that we could possibly do. We also have an issue in when we are trying to prove that a provider has committed an intentional program violation such that we want to disqualify them from the CCAP program. Right now, we're held to a clear and convincing standard of proof. We feel it should be a preponderance of the evidence burden of proof, as it is for Medicaid providers. So it would be the same burden. So that's another suggestion that we have. We also we've had issues, even though we feel that the statute is clear that you have to have your CCAP attendance records when we go out to see you. And if you don't, then that's an overpayment. We've actually had judges come back and say, somebody comes up 6 months later and says, oh, well, here are the records. We didn't have them or whatever, and they've accepted them. So we'd want to clarify that that would not be okay. You have to have the records when we show up. You have to have the records. Another thing that would make it easier for us in terms of determining the overpayment is right now, if we are able to show that a child was not present or there was some error in the overpayment, we then have to go through and determine, well, could they have billed for an absent day? Could they have billed for a vacation day? Which then makes it difficult to calculate the overpayment. And again, that would make it more simple for us. And finally, we would advocate that if there's a fraud conviction in the CCAP program or an intentional program violation, that providers would be permanently disqualified from one violation. Right now, they get a couple bites at the apple before they're permanently disqualified, and we would advocate that they be disqualified after one. The last thing I just want to point out is that the stories, and they're not stories, the cases that Mr. Stillman discussed are terrible cases. But remember, he was involved with them because we had gotten to the point we were doing a criminal investigation where we were doing a search warrant. So necessarily, those are the worst cases. They're the cases that we had enough evidence to go ahead and prosecute, and successfully so. So those are success stories. The Lillian Richardson's case that he referred to is a successful case. We were able, along with the Attorney General's office, we were able to bring a criminal case, and she was I believe she's been convicted, maybe not yet, but she's been charged. And so I just want to, again, keep some perspective in terms of the kinds of cases that we've handled. And I am absolutely committed to fighting fraud, and we are doing that. And I can tell you I have never been told to stand down on a case. I have never had any such instructions. And we are zealously, and I'm sure some people will tell us in this audience, too zealously, pursuing fraudulent behavior. Is it solved? No. Will we continue working on it? Absolutely. But I just want you to get some perspective that I don't think it's anywhere close to the numbers that Mr. Stillman was suggesting.
Thank you. Questions from members? Senator Klein. And actually, the members not on this committee can ask questions too if you want. So one at a time. Now, Senator Klein.
Mr. Chair, thank you, Inspector General, and thank you for your work. You referenced that the $100 million is not an accurate figure in your estimation, but in your testimony, you seemed to validate the concept that million-dollar suitcases are leaving through the airport. Can you hear me? Sorry. Is that something you know or something that you're gleaning, as I am, only from the Fox 9 story that came out 2 days ago? Are you aware of million-dollar suitcases leaving MSP Airport? Is that something that we can substantiate? And let me just progress on that slightly. So the news story, which, Mr. Chair, apparently led to an emergency meeting of this committee 2 days later, had three major assertions. One was that these carry-on bags carrying millions of dollars in cash are leaving regularly from MSP Airport. And I searched the story carefully, as I think most discerning Minnesotans did, for some evidence to that effect, and it was lacking. The second assertion is that, as you mentioned, those million-dollar suitcases are derived directly from fraud of our child support services. And that link also, I think the discerning Minnesotan and certainly the discerning senator would yearn for some strong evidence for, also not present in the story. And lastly, you know, the greatest assertion is that these bags of cash then are going to support terrorism in the Middle East. And again, any Minnesotan would yearn for some absolute certain evidence that that is the case. Certainly if we were going to convene an emergency meeting of this body based on a news story alone, we would hope for that type of substantiation. And perhaps, Mr. Chair, you have some which I lack, or you've done background work that I have not. But I haven't seen it. I didn't see it in the news story. I didn't see it from the second witness who we were not able to question. Again, our role as senators is we're not up for election this year, and there's a reason for that. We are the deliberative body. And when a news story comes out like this that is extremely inflammatory and polarizing and people jump in front of microphones, our responsibility, the reason we're giving the privilege of not running for a campaign this year, is because we are supposed to sit back and reflect, gather the evidence before we perhaps convene a forum like this, ensure ourselves that it is worthy of the scrutiny of this body. And so that has been a long way to ask you, Inspector General, if you can actually substantiate that there are million-dollar bags leaving through MSP Airport.
Ms. Ham.
Thank you, Senator Abler, Senator Klein. I don't know what the amount might be. I can tell you I am aware that cash regularly leaves the airport, and it is my understanding the reason that happens is because there is no banking relationship with certain countries, and so that is the only way that any kind of money can get to the country, whether you're trying to help your family or anything else. So, but I don't know the number. As far as the terrorism link, I can tell you that, as Acting Commissioner Johnson said, in none of our cases have we had specific evidence of terrorism. And if we did, if we were to come across that evidence, we would immediately share it with the Department of Homeland Security. We meet with the Department of Homeland Security, the FBI, the IRS, the Secret Service, DHHS, OIG, local law enforcement. We meet with them on a regular basis throughout the year. And if we were to come across such evidence, we would immediately share it with the appropriate authorities that could look into it.
Thank you, Senator Jensen. To Senator Klein's point.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Ms. Ham and Mr. Johnson. I just want to be clear about something. I don't feel internally that there's any race to judge. You'd use that phrase. And you said something about you wanted to help us adjust to perspective or something, and okay. And then you said that if we were aware, we would immediately share. I guess we have less than a week left, and my concern is not the daycare providers, because I'm quite confident that 98 to 99% of the daycare providers out there are doing a fine job, Somalian or otherwise. I guess my concern is whether or not your department's up to the task. We obviously have a problem, and we learned about it because of Fox 9, not because of you coming to the Health and Human Services Committee or the Human Services Reform Committee. We learned about it through the news, and I just don't feel reassured. And I want to know that your department and the way you function is up to the task, and that you're using the dollars given. You said, I think Rahm Emanuel once said, never let a good crisis go to waste. I don't want this situation to turn into another budget request from you folks. I want you folks to tell me that you're going to take a hard look internally and determine how you can better do the job of making sure that the dollars that we're budgeting for you are going for kids and not terrorists. And I think I need to come away over the next few days with a sense that you're up to it. Because I'm sure that there's going to be lots of studying and lots of research about where the money's going and how much is going out. But I think you've got a big task, because my confidence in you is shaken. Thank you.
Is that a question?
That's not a question.
Okay. Senator Kiffmeyer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Mr. Johnson and Ms. Ham. We've appreciated working with you this year in a variety of areas, but this is something that is very serious, and nonetheless, we have to take that serious approach. So whether there are the suitcases or other things like that is an investigative effort, and those things should be accomplished. What I'm concerned about is that we have a few days left in session, and there were some things that you mentioned, and I would like to see us take some immediate action on those suggestions. I'll just list the ones that I have. One is a surety bond being required. 2 is changing to preponderance of evidence. We have the chair of judiciary here today that I'm sure is listening very carefully, Senator Limmer. Number 3, attendance records. The law would require they have to be there at the time. 4th one, if there is fraud, permanently disqualified. 5th one, unannounced inspections instead of announced inspections. Absolutely. And an announced inspection is no inspection. That is without question. Cameras needed. Statute of limitations that if convicted of fraud, they would be permanently disqualified from that particular career. And then I would add one to it, hearing about these shell companies, that there must be some sort of verification of these, quote, companies in general. We do background checks on people. Why not background checks on companies? Make sure they are a valid company, duly registered and licensed as they should be. But I take a look at these 8 things, and I really would like to not wait till next year. I think we've heard your urgency, and I think we as legislators want to cooperate with that. And we have wonderful revisor's office. We have very skilled staff, and maybe not all of these can be done in a short way. But I would ask for your support and your involvement to take these particular items that I've listed, and let's put our heads together, legislature and the executive branch, and take these on and do our due diligence. That's probably the biggest thing that I think we see here right now, is to do that due diligence. That is within our control. That we can do. We can't know about all the investigations or what there might be out there. But these kinds of things, you don't need for all that. And I think that concept of trusting but verifying is just do it. You've got just hundreds of millions of dollars. And most importantly, millions of dollars in fraud means there are some children in other places that have needs that don't get it. We have hard-working Minnesota taxpayers that have been required to pay into their taxes. for some of these very valuable purposes. For them to see that this is wasted is disheartening to them and unfair to what they do, and they're working hard and paying of them. So that is my question to you, is to ask you that you would work with us to take these things that you have mentioned, other things that may come up as well, and even in these very short days, what are the things that we can do immediately to take some action here? And if you could just respond to that.
Mr. Johnson?
Mr. Chair and Senator Kiffmeyer, we'd be happy to work with you on those items. We'd have to, I think, judge whether there's an appetite for trying to get all that done yet this year, or which pieces of those we think people would be willing to work on. But certainly, those are items, as Ms. Ham said, that we think would help us with our investigations. There's issues we've discussed internally in the past, and if there is a way to get them done this year, we would want to be part of trying to make that happen.
Anyway, Senator Kiffmeyer, just that's a big list. And I think, like, as we suggested, I'm in no interest in rushing a judgment. As Senator Jensen said, I'm a little shaken. And I think that this could be part of a package that we would consider in the interim. And so, Senator Kiffmeyer.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And so I really appreciate all these things that mentioned, but I'd also want to ask, has the department brought these kinds of items as legislative initiatives? You've been very good in almost every year that any agency comes to us in the legislature and says, here's some things that we see need to be addressed. We would like these changes to be made. Have you taken action on any of these items? For all I know, you may have, or so on. I know that when you ask for more investigators or ask for our efforts, we have followed through with that. So on these kinds of policy areas, have you done that?
Mr. Chair and Senator Kiffmeyer, I don't believe these particular items have been brought forward. We have brought forward other items related to trying to tighten up and build some of the internal controls we need in child care, one of which I think was mentioned, which is the limit on the number of children that you can have in a child care center who are children of somebody who is working in the center, which is a common part of how these schemes have worked and has been an issue. That's an example. Ms. Ham might have other examples, I think, of things we have brought forward and had supported. These particular issues, we didn't bring forward a policy bill this year because our policy bill from last year is still sitting. So we weren't ambitious this year about what to bring forward, but these are items that if there's an appetite to take them on, we'd be willing to try to work on where they might fit in. But I think to Senator Abler's point, we want to vet them and make sure that we're doing the ones that we feel we can quickly arrive at consensus on, as opposed to trying to go through a whole list of things that might be more controversial.
Thank you. And so, members, I have Draheim, Hoffman, Cran, Benson, Ralph, and Ingebrigtsen. And so then we're going to go through that list, and then we have one more witness. And so, Senator Draheim.
Thank you, Chair Abler, and thank you for letting me ask one question. So I guess my main question is, how do you prioritize your investigations? So I've heard and from the people that operate care centers, and I've talked to many counties that have approached me, but I'm not on the committees that would normally deal with that, about issues like we're discovering with the Fox 9 report. And I hear from centers getting wrote up for kids using the wrong bottles and things that I would think are minor. And we let the checks and balances slip through our hand, or lack of that. So how do you guys prioritize the investigations and the resources from your position, so as an investigator? Thank you.
Ms. Ham.
Thank you, Senators. So those are two separate areas within OIG. So one doesn't take away from the other. The licensing area, we are, for family child care, those inspections are done by the counties, not by my department. And then we have our child care centers, which are my licensors. And we do the inspections annually. The child care fraud unit is separate, and the way we typically prioritize, at least one of the ways, is the amount of money involved. We will naturally look at centers that are getting more CCAP money that we suspect may be fraudulent. We would tend to look at them before we would look at somebody who had a smaller amount.
Senator Hoffman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And, you know, it's I'm kind of empty and speechless just on hearing this and seeing what's going on. And we've been part of 2 issues this year that were uncovered. And if it wasn't for Chris Sears, we would have never uncovered a couple of issues that we dealt with in another committee that we had. So I'm glad that people are able to bring to light some things, and even know that there's some questions that pop in the conversation of where we're going. It does cause us, Mr. Chair, I think, further discussion. If somebody claims you have a 70 to 80% fraud rate, and there's lacking of internal controls, and there's lack of control and checks and balances within the own Office of Inspector General, it dawned on me that we do have an entity to look at how our internal agencies are working, and that's, you know, through our legislative auditor. And from my record, it was a child care reimbursement that was done in 2005. So maybe one of the things to put in your box, Mr. Chair, is to have you know, our own legislative auditor provide us, and they have some great detail. Their early childhood report they did was immense with detail, and I think that is something at our purview that we should take advantage of, especially because we're going to get an unbiased approach that's going to truly look at where some of these things are missing. So, Mr. Chair, having said that, I just have a question. If child care licensing is under the OIG, in that you had mentioned the issue that there are some parent aware, a question and then a follow-up statement. Are those active investigations you have? Are the majority of those a parent aware? And the second piece to that is, do the ones that were isolated within this report or this study, do those also come from parent aware?
Ms. Ham or Mr. Johnson?
Mr. Chair and Senator Hoffman, Parent Aware is a rating that's given to a child
Mr. Chair,
program.
I know what Parent Aware is, but let me rephrase that question, because I don't need to go. I don't want to take anybody's time on. Were those agencies under a Parent Aware rating? Yes or no?
Ms. Ham, Mr. Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Senator
Do you
Hoffman. I'm
understand
just
the
not quite clear. When you say those agencies, are you talking about the 13 that we closed?
Yes.
I will not speculate. We can certainly get you that. I don't know the answer to that.
I think we'd want to know that.
I think we'd want to know that, Mr. Chair, because the other thing we want to know is we give a lot of money to Parent Aware to help establish if the answer to the question is positive or negative in one aspect. But I would also ask our legislative auditor, as long as we're looking at, you might as well touch not just one point, but the multiple points of connection within this, how this system works. And that would also be an audit of Parent Aware with that, Mr. Chair. And that's, I guess, a statement to you if we're going to look at this from a holistic viewpoint, to say, let's get to the issues that you hear about. What are the influence? What's the aligned approach? Where's the lack of control? Where's the checks and balance? And where's the objectivity? And I think that will get us to that answer.
And that's fair. And I think to Senator Klein's question, is there a problem? And if it is, what is it? And so that's what I'm after here. And so there's a whole line. So I'll put, go ahead, Senator Hayden.
Well,
please.
thank you, Mr. Chair. I mean, I just want to be clear. To the point of Senator Hoffman talking about Parent Aware, I think the reason why you got kind of a puzzled look is because Parent Aware is really looks at the curriculum that the child care center is using to ensure that they're teaching them their early education and all the principles of early education. So, I mean, I think it could be useful, but it doesn't have anything to do, at least the way that I understand Parent Aware, with the fiscal responsibility of the child care center. So,
well, Senator Hayden, I think the point is, it'd be interesting to know. So if every one that was investigated is a 1 or no star system, then that'd be interesting. If all the 4 stars are never showing up, that'd be nice to know. That's all Senator Hoffman's saying. Let me speak for him. I will speak for Senator Hoffman.
Well, that's good. Well,
I would never do that. No,
yeah, well, you're braver than me to speak for Senator Hoffman.
Senator Abler,
Ms. Ham.
I do have it. I've been told none of those 13 were Parent Aware that were shut down. None of them were Parent Aware rated.
So there you go. and you're all right. Okay, Senator Coran.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Help me out. I think, there's a lot of information, and I think all of us realize that this is extremely concerning. There's a couple different issues, but focus on the fraud, waste, and abuse that most look and say, hey, this, we're very concerned. I think Senator Kiffmeyer said it properly, is that we want to make sure that our dollars are prioritized to those in need. And when we hear of these programs, and we have our Office of our Legislative Auditor, every single report comes out that we are failing and failing to compliance and statutory compliance at every level. So when these accusations are made, we take them seriously. I don't think Mr. Stillman, as you can tell, he was a little uncomfortable being here, and I don't think anybody takes that lightly at all. And so I think we have to take his accusations very seriously, and that's what I appreciate Senator Abler calling this together. But of the email information, of the redacted emails, which sounded like they contained some maybe more damning information or some more statistical information that would have added more merit or value to his statements, I want to know who redacted those emails, and secondarily, did the redacted information, was it critical to an investigation, the reason for the redaction, or was it more damning to the agency, and his accusations actually have more merit to them than we would acknowledge?
Mr. Johnson.
Mr. Chair and Senator Coran, the redacted information was redacted by attorneys at DHS. It was redacted either because it was personal information on an individual or because it was investigative information that could not be revealed.
Mr.
Senator
Chair.
Coran.
I appreciate that, but that doesn't seem to align with it appears the statistical information that he claimed was in there. So we would appreciate copies of those unredacted emails, everything you can share with us and our body, so we can understand the validity. Again, I don't think he came here and taking this lightly. I know he threw a lot of information on us in the PCA program and all of those. So with that, I'll leave that. The second area is, so what have we learned from a processing perspective? Yeah, I'm a process guy, and these guys get sick of hearing me. But so what have we learned, and what have we changed to put in more controls on eligibility determination, those families that have a need and participate in these programs? Those that have participated in these programs, I think the story indicates that they may be complicit or knowingly and willingly participating in that program. Are they excluded? Do we track those families? And are they excluded for future programs? And if so, is it just the child care program, or are there other benefits that they're entitled to, and what's the impact on those?
Whomever. Ms. Ham.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Senator. We, if a family member were found to have, that we could prove that a family member was colluding, committing fraud in order to get child care benefits, we would have the ability to cut those benefits off, and they would have a right to a hearing. And then if we prevailed in the hearing, they would not be eligible for the child care subsidy. I'm not certain about other benefits.
Mr. Johnson.
Mr. Chair and Senator Coran, I'm not aware that we do anything relative to the individual families unless they are convicted of a crime in some fashion. We often don't necessarily know what their role has been or how extensive that has been. But I could follow up on that and see if there's more information.
Mr. Chair? I think in the story there's some pretty serious accusations that there's families knowingly participating in that. So are you telling me that we, in all of your investigations, what is it, 13, 14, and where you've received or had prosecutions, not a single family member, not a single participant was included in that investigation and the information, an investigation at all, I guess? That would be my question.
Yes,
and any subsequent penalties to those, what would they be?
Mr. Chair, Senator, what I would say is no parents were named as defendants, and that is quite often that you will focus on the source of the mastermind behind the fraud, and so typically you will file charges against the owner, the manager, whomever. That doesn't mean that parents weren't part of the investigation, but they were not charged.
Mr. Chair, last
Senator Brown, you get your last.
Thank you. with that, then, you know, I understand the desire in the prosecution to always go up to the largest and the highest level. But in this particular case, as in others, if let's just say the report is half accurate and it's only $50 million in theft on an annual basis, we might not be able to afford to wait for the kingpin. And so I'd say everybody involved in this program, we should be looking at everybody, and would appreciate, as we work forward, I appreciate your suggestions as well. I would ask why we didn't have that on our agenda. This doesn't appear to be a new topic. Why that was not on our agenda as a great policy that we could all work on, and it's a bipartisan policy. Why that was not in the our original or packet sometime early in this session. So thank you, Mr. Chair, for providing the opportunity.
Yeah, I'll take that as a statement. Senator Benson.
Thank you. I didn't realize the list was so long after Senator Klein started talking, but it's to the point that Senator Klein made. We're not here about suitcases or terrorism because that is not our purview. What is concerning is evidence of fraud in one of our public programs, and now we have had someone talk to us not just about childcare but about PCAs as well. And every day we fight for resources with education and transportation, and frankly, this kind of story just makes it harder for HHS to put a stake in the ground and say, you know what, we actually do need money because we need to take care of people. And so that's why we need to have this hearing, so that we start to rebuild some confidence that when somebody like Senator Abler or Senator Ralph comes up and says, you know what, our PCAs need a raise, and there aren't enough people to take care of the people who need us. You know what happens with the Fox 9 story? Well, look at all the money that's being wasted. And it undermines the message of people who are very sincere, and all the people who sit at usually the table, the testifier table on 1200, and say, I can't get anybody to come to my house that I can trust, that I respect. And so when I hear there's childcare fraud, and I hear there's also a wait list, it makes me really angry, because there are sincere people who want to work, who cannot get to work because they can't get on CCAP. And the answer is always spend more money. Well, you know what? Now the answer is stop the fraud. When Senator Ralph is trying to do reforms with PCAs, and we hear, oh, it's just so hard. We hear from the department, we can't possibly do that. We can't possibly check on anything. Well, guess what? Now the answer is, well, it's to stop fraud. So that's why this hearing matters now. Yes, it's at the end of session. Yes, everybody's got other things they need to be doing. But when we ask for a report, so what did you do with your interim? I'm guessing there are going to be a lot of people who are going to come with information because of the curiosity that this report created, who are going to say, okay, what can we actually do? Because we're going to have to rebuild some confidence that money isn't being run through a sieve in our public programs. That's why this hearing needs to happen now, so that next year when we have the budget fight, we're putting controls in place. We are stating the controls that we're going to put in place so that the people who need the services get the services, and the people who are trying to steal from the people of Minnesota go to jail. So that's why this hearing matters. Now, I appreciate that the Office of the Inspector General was formed. Mr. Kerber's chief mission early on seemed to be child care licensing, not actually setting up structures that would give feedback that says there might be fraud here. So with all due respect to Mr. Kerber, who is no longer here, kudos on the Office of Inspector General, but he sort of missed the mark on where priorities need to be, because now we have, you know, moms who've been running child care for 15 years who have to post a notice that say they did something terrible when they didn't. So a little missed the mark on where the energy should have been placed. I know that that Ms. Ham was an auditor, so I hope that I believe you came from at least an audit compliance background. So Are we checking with the families, saying, do you use this many hours of childcare a day? It's something that Senator Coran raised. Well, by the way, if you lie to us, it's fraud and you're ineligible. Because when you do audits, when you do financial audits, and a vendor's supposed to be receiving payments, you say, did you receive these payments? I mean, there's two sides to every transaction. And maybe asking some of those questions means the bad actors who are taking advantage of innocent people actually get chilled. And then we don't have to work so hard to stop the bad people. So thank goodness Senator Kiffmeyer's organized. Because I just reached over and I'm like, oh, maybe we could do, anyway. So I stole her homework, I'll fully acknowledge. But in all sincerity, we're at the end of session. We are not going to rush things. But I think it is worthwhile for those of us who've been looking at human services for a while. Perhaps there is a place in statute where there's already surety bonds. Maybe we can look at that and say, you know what, this was well vetted and it seems to be effective. Let's consider it. Something along the lines of if we need a word change that said attendance records need to be available at the time of inspection, that doesn't seem very controversial. If it empowers you, then I think there are some reasonable things we can do. So time is short. I will stop talking, but I thank you, Senator Abler, for this time. I thank the folks from Human Services for coming forward through something that's fairly unpleasant. But truth is hard, and fixing things isn't going to happen unless we sort of peel back and get to the core of the problem. And maybe by making this public, some of the people who are bad actors will say, you know what, Minnesota is not going to be friendly to bad actors anymore. Let's try another state. And that would be the goal. So thank you,
Senator
Mr. Chair.
Benson. And there's three more, and so then we're going to take some more witnesses, but so maybe one short comment, a question. Senator Ralph.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Actually, I've got two. The first is that I notice in your list, for example, one of the lists was unannounced inspections. Now, I'm curious as to why you would need legislative authority to do that. Is there something now in your authority that prevents that? You mentioned one of the things you wanted was that, and I'm kind of curious. And that leads to my broader question of this list and of the other lists, excuse me. Are there things you can do without the legislature having to crank up the mechanism? It seems to me that internally you've identified some things already, and in looking at that, some of those things on the list may be things that, as a matter of policy within the agency, would be available as a way to go forward. So I asked that question somewhat rhetorically, but is there anything that prevents you from initiating some of this? And then I have a follow-up, one quick follow-up.
Ms. Ham.
Mr. Chair, Senator Ralph, we have the ability to do unannounced visits for licensing. I believe what that is referring to is in the SIRS context, so that would be the medical assistance fraud. We actually have to give people 24 hours notice to get the records, and that is a critical piece that we would love to see changed. But that does exist. I believe in the child care context we can do an unannounced, but in the medical assistance we cannot.
Senator Ralph.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The other thing that seems to just click in my mind back when we were doing some studying on the 0 to 5 study, that CCAP is not the only child care assistance program, and so I guess I caution that we confine ourselves to this one particular program, and that because we do have a chance here to focus and narrow in on and try to get to the root causes of some of the systemic problems, as Senator Coran referred to, that I think we have to be careful not to limit ourselves to just one or two programs. But I think that the idea here is if there's fraud going on and there's the kind of money going out of the government incorrectly that seems to be at least alluded to, and who knows whether the figure's 100 million or 15 million or 5 million, fraud is fraud. And it's money that's being taken from, as Senator Benson referred to, a program that is very important, and that's the complex PCA program, for example. So I guess my question is do your figures and does your investigations, pardon me, cover more areas than CCAP and I know, for example, Head Start, which is federal, that has a child care component, and I am very concerned that this same rubric that's taking place in the child care area is being used in other areas. These are fairly sophisticated defrauding schemes, and I just want to make sure that we're not leaving something on the table here.
Ms. Ham.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Senator Ralph, excellent question. I'm not supposed to say that. Anyway, we have begun to have discussions with the Department of Education because we have become aware that, as you say, there are some Department of Education may be providing some child care assistance as well. And so we've just begun having those discussions with them to see what, if any, program integrity they're doing. When we've had those discussions, if we determine that there is a gap, I don't know if there is, but if there is, then we will be back seeking authority to be able to work with that as well. And an additional piece is the Department of Education gives assistance in providing food to child care centers, and that's another place where there's a potential for fraud. So we will be working with the Department of Education to determine if there's a gap in enforcement there.
Senator Ingebrigtsen. I never thought I'd say that word in the context of human services. Welcome
Thank
to the committee.
Mr. Chair.
Welcome to the
I tell you,
committee.
the conversation has been very interesting as to how to move forward with some of the issues here. But folks, and thank you, Mr. Chair, for calling this. I think it had to be done, obviously, and I have to agree with Senator Jensen's comment, and I'll say why later. But Commissioner Johnson, I did see the report, and I was troubled a little bit by, I guess, starting out with the administration not knowing a whole lot about what was going on. And I can get that. I can understand that. I can understand him not being in the mix there, if not knowing that it's very big. However, you made a couple of comments that it troubles me a little, that you see no relation to terrorism, or you also said you didn't think it was any involvement with organized crime. I'm wondering how you would know that and what experience you have in even identifying that. And then I'll follow up with just one question, if you could go ahead and do that.
Mr. Johnson, Ms. Ham, whichever.
Mr. Chair and Senator Ingebrigtsen, on both of those issues, I was specifically addressing what is publicly known, which is the cases we've charged. And in those cases, there's no connection to terrorism, and there were no charges made around organized crime in those cases. Part of what's complicated about this, as I said before, is there are ongoing investigations. And I'm not in the room with the investigators chatting with them about what they're doing and not doing, but they certainly know a lot of other things that they believe are going on from conversations that they are having. Those are not charged cases. There's not evidence that's been brought before a court to say what is or isn't happening. And I'm just trying to differentiate what I can talk about and what I know versus what investigators might be talking to one another about, but has not yet been charged, not yet evidence been put before a court.
Okay. Senator Ingebrigtsen. And just one more comment, if I could. I jotted down some notes here. The fraudulent rate, 50 to 80%. Now, these are accusations, all accusations, nothing substantiated here. Number one, we're not a courtroom here, but we are a group of senators that are taking this very serious, and I think it behooves us to follow up on. The idea that Mr. Stillman had to resign was a question mark I had, as well as the redaction, and I think the senator on the other asked that question earlier. But I think what's going on, folks, is there's some accusations that have come forward now, not only from Mr. Stillman, but also the other gentleman that was interviewed by the Fox News, that are very, very compelling, very damaging, and it behooves us, I think, to move forward with something to fix the mechanics. I get that, I understand that, I hear that going on here, but I think this is way bigger than what's going on here in this room, frankly. I think this investigation has to be handled I think it was a good suggestion that the federals may want to look into this. I do agree with Senator Jensen. I don't think with all due respect to Mr. Johnson and Mr. Ham, I don't think you're probably up to it. And I think these things have to be answered. It is now thrown out there. It behooves us all to get the answers as to whether this thing of terrorism or organized crime, that just runs rampant if it's not addressed, and we have to do that, Mr. Chair, and thank you again for bringing that forward.
So there's 2 more on the list, but we have to move to the next 1 or 2 witnesses. Did Solicitor General Alan Gilbert, is he here still, and do they wish to testify? Please come up if you will. Thanks for bearing with us, and it's nice you can be here on short notice. And so I'm clearly not a good lawyer because I don't know what you're going to say, but I'm glad you're here to offer your comments.
Well, first of all, I want to thank you for inviting us to attend this hearing today, and I'll try to keep it short. What I would like to talk about is just bring everybody back to what the process is here for prosecuting a fraud, for actually successfully prevailing in court.
Oh, you're supposed to tell us your name, so I'm still a bad lawyer.
Alan Gilbert, I'm the State
welcome.
Solicitor General.
Thanks.
And again, I would just like to talk about the process, just so everyone's familiar with that. And in terms of the process, I think it's important for everyone to know, and I think you do, that this particular program that deals with child care assistance is funded by by federal dollars, state dollars, and county dollars. And the program is administered at the county level by each individual county, and certainly has oversight by DHS and the counties in turn. In terms of the general proposition as it relates to criminal prosecutions, our criminal justice system places an important element on 2 things: the investigation that leads to the prosecution, and then the actual prosecution itself. And those functions are performed by 2 different people. In this case, you have DHS investigating and the counties investigating as well. And as Ms. Ham indicated, sometimes they work together in terms of the investigation. And then there's a referral based upon credible evidence of criminal fraud that goes to the prosecuting agency. And as a practical matter, the way it has worked in this context is that the prosecutor has typically been, as Ms. Ham indicated, the U.S. Attorney's Office because of their involvement with federal dollars and their oversight with HHS, and the counties. The individual county attorneys have prosecuted, again, because of the dollars involved and the fact that the counties are actually administering the program, and they're the ones who have direct contact, oftentimes, with the licensees. In terms of the Attorney General's office, for example, we typically don't have original criminal jurisdiction, although as it relates to this area of the law, there is a narrow exception for the Attorney General's office to actually prosecute these claims, again, based upon investigations that are prepared by either DHS or a county. But oftentimes, typically, it's been the U.S. Attorney's Office because of the involvement of the federal funds and the administration of the program by the counties, where the U.S. Attorney's Office and the counties are involved. I think as you're thinking about possible legislative items, to say the least, as I heard all of you talking about it, I think it's important to also focus on, well, what can be even more helpful in terms of the investigative part of this process. And I heard some suggestions about unannounced searches or whatever it might be, and that's a bit of a complicated issue, as you mentioned, Ms. Ham. But as an example, I hope you don't lose sight of the more, and sometimes it's the more mundane, when you hear about some of the allegations that are being made here in terms of suitcases full of money and things of that kind. And again, I have no knowledge of that one way or another. But as a practical matter, the anatomy of a prosecution is really important. If you are going to be able to actually serve the public in terms of having successful prosecutions, you got to have a good investigation as well as a good prosecution. There's no doubt about that. So to the extent you think about changes that can be made, I hope you'll think about what changes can be made to the investigative process as well. And I think there has been some give and take on that today as you've talked about that. So unless you have other questions, I just wanted to make sure
I
we
think
don't
that's very
lose sight
helpful.
of that process.
Well, thank you, Mr. Gilbert. And so, Mr. Jamal, thank you. You can stand down. So
Mr. Chair?
Oh, please, yeah, go
I
ahead.
just wanted to add a little bit as a closing. Thanks again for the opportunity to be here and to share this
Well,
information.
you're not leaving yet, so you get to stay. But you don't get to close. Do you want to say something to that?
No.
Okay. No, Mr. Gilbert, you're excused. Mr. Johnson's not excused. You can go. Mr. Jamal, would you want to come up? And Ms. Ham, you can stay here too. There's plenty of room. So
I just wanted
one
to
more
go back
person.
to the, Mr. Chair, I just wanted to go back to the point that Senator Klein made earlier and talk a little bit about, what is the problem? What do we know here? What we know is that we have a problem with child care fraud. That's a problem that we identified in 2012. We've been working on since then. We came to you last year and said we need more resources, more than twice the resources we have now from an FTE standpoint to work on this issue because of what we're seeing in terms of the scale of that fraud. We don't know how much money is going of that fraud money is going to a suitcase, and I don't know personally how much money is going out of the airport on a given year in suitcases generally. That's not something that we at DHS would be particularly concerned about. But I do want to address to the point that, to the comments that Senator Jensen and Senator Engelbretson made too. To the extent that when you say you don't have confidence, if you don't have confidence in us to look at international terrorism scheme, you probably shouldn't, because that's not our jurisdiction and that's not what we're working on. We're working on, are these dollars going to pay for child care for kids who are eligible for child care, or are these dollars getting siphoned off by people who are running a scam and putting that money into their pocket and then potentially doing something else with it? And we are all concerned about what that something else might be. And that's why, as we said, as Mr. Stillman said, and as Mr. Gilbert said, we work with other investigative agencies that do have that jurisdiction. And as I said in my opening comments, to the extent that they're working on a bigger case, may very well be. They wouldn't be talking to us about that until maybe the day before they decided they were going to indict it, and then they might let us know what was happening.
Okay.
And so I believe we've done well with our investigation of child care fraud. I think we've developed a really good method of working around those cases. We've gotten convictions. We asked for additional resources because we need them in order to keep up with the work that's coming at us. I believe that we're doing very well at that work, and that we should continue to do that work, and we should continue to do it at the pace that we're doing it, if not faster.
Thanks. So stay there. Mr. Jamal, welcome to the committee.
Mr. Chair.
No, we have to just let...
To the point, to Mr. Johnson.
We're going to start bleeding people pretty soon. I'd like to get all the testimony in, and then you can...
okay.
I'll put you on the list. There's actually 3 others ahead. So, Mr. Jamal, welcome to the committee.
Thank you very much, Chair, for having me here. Thank you, members of the committee. Let me begin.
Tell us your name, Mr. Jamal.
My name is Omar Jamal. I've been resident of St. Paul in Minnesota for the last 20 years. And I was listening to this. I noticed there are some issues that keeps coming back, which as a community we've been dealing with for the last 15 years. For example, Jack or Hank Caroline mentioned or asked $100 million leaving out of the airport. I'll tell you where that money is coming from. And it's not only the airport here, because if you are carrying money to that amount, if your flight starts from Minneapolis Airport, which is maybe non-stop flight from Minneapolis to Amsterdam, KLM, you're required to fill out a form to declare the money that you are carrying with you in a cash. If your flight is going through other local airports, I'm flying through New York to London, England, or I'm flying through Chicago to Germany, Frankfurt, I don't have to fill the form up here. I will fill out the form the last airport that will take me out of the country. So even sometimes I don't even have to fill any form right here at this airport. I will do it at the other airport from which I'll be departing, leaving the country. And that money is, every transaction of that money is registered by the federal government. It's from the hawalas, because banks won't do it. Simple as that. U.S. Bank, Wells Fargo's Bank, Associated Bank, they all closed their accounts. And the Congress and any level of the federal government looked into this, and that's why, is there questions surrounding that actions? Definitely. Is it being really looked into very closely? Of course. Where the money eventually end up, mysterious. Most often it is going back to needy people. But when you're dealing with a country with a significant absence of effective governments, anything goes in there, fees for protection, taxation, extortion, kidnapping, you name it. So you do that on your own risk.
Mr. Jamal?
That is not the focus. The focus is child daycare and DHS.
Back to DHS.
Yeah, back to DHS. Let's deal with. We've been dealing with DHS for the last years, a few years. Jack Johnson, I believe I met him a couple of times. Carl Ham, we've been meeting. What we have, to the best of my understanding, is Governor McDayton, a friend of mine, has not shown any strong leadership in this area. There is a failure of communication. Is there a fraud? Yes. There is a fraud. We cannot deny that. Is they just trying their best to address these issues? Yes. But what we are deeply concerned, you are the stewardship of the taxpayers' money in this state. There are people who are with a lot of information who would like to talk to you about this issue. I don't see them here. The more information, accurate information you have, the better chance that you are making the right decision. This issue is epidemic, very serious. Is that money going out of the country? Yes. Is it going the amount, $100 million? No, I don't think so. Is it leaving? Probably. But as soon as this is the beginning of a serious, I think, and the session is almost over, and this is very, very important. I'm very angry about this situation, because not only if you have child daycare services, with the idea behind it is making money, what you forget is what kind of service are you providing to them? What kind of children are you producing for this state? What kind of service are they getting? That's completely overlooked, because when I'm opening one, I'm opening it simply for the money. I don't give a hoot about the service you're talking about. I don't care. So DHS needs to be aggressively reaching out and establishing, without the coordination of the community that's mostly affected this issue. We are scheduling a meeting next month, the 8th, with the DHS, but talking about these issues. And I think we are saddened. We are kept, getting on the front line news, on the front newspapers. And by the way, we get used to that. Since 9/11, we don't care.
Mr. Jamal,
right? Yeah.
one minute, just kind of wrap it up, okay?
Okay, so.
We're running out of time.
Yeah, to make it short, this will be ongoing discussion. It's not going to be over today. And we'll be continuing talking to DHS. And it is getting, it's every single member of the community. We are sometimes running into parents who are complaining. This is a very serious issue. I don't know what we can do to get your attention on this issue. It's very serious. It's getting worse every minute. And I hope that at this time, thanks to Jeff for breaking this news, I hope we're going to be able together to at least do something to try to fix it. If there's a problem, you investigate, you analyze the problem, you learn the system, the flaws in the system, and then you fix it. We need to put somehow a strategy in place to fix and save millions of dollars of taxpayers' money, none of which it's not even accounted for. Again, thanks for listening, and sorry, because this issue really touched me deeply, because I deal with it almost every day. And we force ourselves into the offices in order to bring this issue to the attention of people who are making decisions on this issue. Thank you for listening, and I hope we'll be continuing talking about this issue, because it's one that's very dear to us. Thank you very much, Committee.
Thank you, Mr. Jamal. And I have 3 more members with questions, and I have some closing comments, and then we'll kind of wind her down. Senator Matthews. And this was the old list, so Senator Jamal, you can stay there if you want, Mr. Jamal. This is Joe.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Johnson and Ms. Ham, for your testimony. And Our job here is to hear what both sides are saying and evaluate the reasons. And that's what we have to do to everyone who's come and they say, this is true or this is not true, and here are the reasons, from the first testimony to yours. And that's what this hearing is attempting to do. So my question is, the 100 million number was thrown out. Reasons were given that to me seem compelling enough that they need to be looked into to see, you know, where's the truth and veracity in those statements. You come up and say that number cannot be realistic. So my question for you is, what number do you believe is realistic, and why, and how do you get to those numbers? Is it solely based on the added total of what you charge or what you convict, or does your number account for the possibility of a moderate or a high probability of fraud outside of what you charge or convict?
Mr. Johnson, Ms. Ham.
Mr. Chair and Senator, one of the difficult things about talking about the scope of fraud is that you don't know what you don't know. And so we can't share beyond what we know. And as I said before, we've convicted 6 cases. There's $4.6 million in restitution on that. That gives you a sense of the size of those particular cases. Often what gets actually put into restitution in the court order is less than what might have actually been paid out to that provider, because, as Mr. Gilbert says, you have to go through this painstaking process of identifying all the evidence. So I don't have an exact number, but it might be even more for those 6. We're investigating 10 now. And so I can't give you that exact number. Everyone wants to know what the exact number is, and I'm not sure what it is either. It feels, but I can tell you that 100 million doesn't seem credible because it's just too far beyond what we know from the investigations that we've done and the ones that we have ongoing and the ones that we know are coming to us. And the scope of those particular providers. We also know, and I mean, you have a letter here from the Minnesota Child Care Association, and there's a lot of good child care providers out there who aren't doing anything like this and are concerned, and as Mr. Jamal said, they want to see these frauds be prosecuted more than anybody because it detracts from their business model and it detracts from their reputation of what they're in. So 100 million out of $250 million budget is not a credible number, nor does it lie into what we know from the investigations that we're working on and that we've done in the past. But it's a bigger number than it should be. And I think when I was saying before, I think we all agree there's a problem with child care fraud, and that we all agree that's a pretty big problem. I'm just not willing to go quite as high as 100 million when I'm talking about what I think a big problem is. But I do think that it's millions of dollars, and we've been working at it for several years, and the additional resources we have will allow us to accelerate that work and to be able to shut down more of these centers.
Thanks. I just have to move along. Senator Jasinski.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As well, I never thought I'd be in HHS testifying as well.
Welcome to the committee, and all these new names for the
me.
department to keep track of. It's a good practice.
I want to thank Fox 9 News. So a little bit of history, and I'll try and keep it short. So Senator Draham and I and myself, over the summer, this last summer, kind of got interested in the fraud and those things. So we started meeting with county workers, and from what we've heard, this is a very common thing that's going on, and it's very disturbing, the amount of money. And when I saw it in the news this morning, I got a text from one of those county workers that says, "I told you so." That's exactly what the text was. I mean, this is going on, and I guess the one example we got when we were sitting in the meeting is a family of 5, between the daycare coming back in and paying for the kids, was $10,000 a month for a family of 5 between all programs. Is disturbing to me. They said that's just an isolated case. They're seeing it all over the place. So one family of 5 is collecting $10,000 or $120,000 a year in some type of welfare, daycare, money supported by us as taxpayers. And they're telling me, and Senator Draham could that this is the norm. And when they go to tell their counties, they say, "Oh, well, we can't bring that up." And that's kind of the concerning thing I heard today, is they can't bring this up because it's prevented, and they'll lose their job, and they're afraid of their jobs. We had one person that was afraid to come in and talk about this, but this is not a unique thing. This is a commonality, and this is just one small county that we talked, or a couple small counties we talked. You think of Hennepin and Ramsey County and what those numbers are. The $100 million does not surprise me at all by combining the different figures or the different money and the different subsidies and the different things. This, and again, I'm out to help the people that need it just as much as anybody else is in the state. But to have these shockingly numbers come out and see in the news and just think that's going on is disturbing. It really is. And I don't know how, if Fox 9, I mean, the amount of people they put on Fox 9 to discover this versus what you guys are using in the Inspector General office. I mean, what are we doing wrong that we can't find this? Because Fox 9, I can't imagine, has a huge inspection budget that we do. So I guess it's just very disturbing, and I think the people out there are very, very irate, and we need to put a stop to it because we need to help the people that need the help and not are shipping the money somewhere else to fund something that we don't want. So thank you for having me at this committee. I promise I won't come back for a long time, but this is very, very disturbing, and I think the average taxpayer out there is really irritated by it. Thank you.
I think you expressed our concerns very well. Senator Jensen, would you like the last question?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to circle back to Mr. Johnson's comments. Mr. Johnson, the Department of Human Services does a lot of good work. There's no question. So when I said my confidence was shaken, and you spoke to that, and I appreciate that, I think I was probably speaking at two levels. One is relationships do matter. And were it not for the Fox 9 News, I, who sit on the Health and Human Services and the Human Services Reform Committee, I would really have no awareness of the magnitude of this problem or that this problem even existed. So that shakes my confidence. And then on another level, I think one of the things, I think total spending, I think for DHS is $17 billion, if you look at the federal, and give or take. And I think that in terms of the ability of the department to prioritize and say, how do we best be good stewards of the dollars we're receiving? I mean, it's not just about starting new programs or adding new initiatives, this or that or the other thing. It's looking at the core mission and making certain that the dollars are indeed being stewarded appropriately. Because, as Mr. Jamal says, when we don't, it spreads like a disease. And so now our confidence is shaken. You have a new job. You have to bolster our confidence. You have to come up with a plan. I've got 100 questions, but I'm not going to ask them. And I don't want to know what the number is because nobody can tell me. But I know that somehow you need to restore my confidence in you so that we can go forward, so that when we do the budgeting in the next biennium, I can sit back and listen and say, okay, that makes sense. That's what I'm asking. Thank you.
Thank you. And
let me add to one thing.
Mr. Jamal, no. Thank you. You had your chance. So we have to wrap up. It's after 5. We're 35 minutes over time. So thank you, if you don't mind. So I just wanted to offer some thoughts here. And so I actually believe Mr. Stillman. I don't know what's in it for him to go public like this. And I believe that he believes what he said. And he worked at your store for 8 years, and he looked at things, and he saw things. And there's many things he couldn't say because it would be intemperate. You can stay, Mr. Johnson, if you like. You can stay. I'm just chatting with you, too. So, and so this committee is committed to the health and welfare of over 1 million people that we touch on a bipartisan basis. How do we go about this topic? Is it a sensitive topic? Yes. Is it our responsibility? Yes. Do you want the same things we want? I'm willing to accept yes. Are you perfect at it? Neither am I. But I think there are some impediments to having the things you want to happen and I want to happen because of all kinds of reasons. Clever criminals who are doing things that we haven't quite thought of how they do it. I don't know if it's the staffing, and I don't know if there's some relational issues in the department that hamper some things from going forward that the two of you might want to see. I don't know if there's some influence from outside places, which may be true. And so it's our job to figure that out. And because still, I can't get PCA care for a guy who needs services for 10 hours a day or more. I can't get a rate. I can't get them to $13 an hour because they can't get out of bed without the help. And when that person, that man or woman, is well cared for And the people who need all the services they could need when they have fallen into these situations through no fault of their own, then I guess I won't care anymore. But I care a lot. And we've done many things in these 2 years. We've worked on changing policies to move people from institutional settings into independent living. We've talked about how to make min choices work better. We've done ways to help many things to occur. I think we're going to have to dig into the fraud side and help you, but also we're going to have to not be afraid to push each other. And I think there is fire underneath this smoke. And I'm not going to ascribe any motives to it because that would be incorrect, but I think we're not achieving the aims we seek. And when the money gets really tight next year, we're going to wish we had some of that. And in a $15-some billion program or whatever the number is, a couple of percent goes a long ways. And so I want to thank the department for having the courage to sit here. I want to thank Mr. Stillman, who has not heard the last, have not heard the last from him. And I hope there's other Stillmans in the department and in every department at this state. And sometimes they're afraid to come forward because of protocol or somebody who's in a position who doesn't want them to say what they know. That is not okay. And that is a failure of leadership from the very top. I'm not the top. I'm just a representative of this committee with all my fine colleagues. But we want the best out of Minnesota to be the state that we are so proud of, that people are well served, they're cared for, the money is spent effectively, and, you know, the men are good looking or whichever and all that. That's what we want. And so that's what I'm after. And so I hope the Stillmans of the world do not quit talking. And I hope that people from your departments will come to us and say what they think. We'll protect their identities, and I'm not going to embarrass them at all. And I don't care who gets in trouble. I'm not after anybody's job. I'm after the service. And I want to make sure all the people who can't get out of bed can get out of bed and be all they could be and have the jobs and all the joys that we hope that they get. That's what drives me. I want to thank the committee members. I thank all the novice human service people from coming today. This topic is not done, but this is a very good start, and I want to thank everybody for that. Thank you very much. With that, we're adjourned.